There are so many actors who portrayed comic book characters in the aughts or earlier that are coming back and reprising their roles in these big mega franchises. We already had the Spider Bros, Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield, come back in Spider-Man No Way Home, as well as reintroducing Charlie Cox as Matt Murdock, aka Daredevil, from the Netflix series. We had Patrick Stewart as Professor Charles Xavier in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Sam Raimi's Madness. And if Warner Brothers ever gets their shit together, we will be seeing Michael Keaton return as Bruce Wayne Batman in the Flash movie coming out next year, possibly. I won't hold my breath, but maybe. And hell, even a couple years ago, we had a short film that went pseudo-viral, having Tom Jane reprise his role as Frank Castle the Punisher. Think about it. Tom Jane as the Punisher. And people liked it. That movie was awful. No Star Wars. But with this idea of bringing back actors to play the comic book characters that they portrayed back in the day, before the current Marvel and DC extended universes ever took place, might I throw an actor into the ring for them to return to their comic book glory? No, I am not talking about an Into the Fantastic universe where Jessica Alba meets Kate Mara and whoever played the Roger Corman woman and, do stuff. No, I am talking about an actor who, on the surface, does not look like the comic book character that they were cast to play. But through his work in the film and his persona as a film star, he fully encapsulated the role and made it even more memorable than it would have been on paper. So memorable, I would argue, that he clearly deserves a reunion with this character that he cast off over 15 years ago. And the actor I am talking about is clearly... Yeah, I said over 15 years ago. It's mid-2000s. No basketball scene, but I like where your head's at. Maybe... Right you are! Bring back Keanu Reeves as Constantine. So before I get into the meat of the essay, I'd like to start with a brief trigger warning. This film alludes to or shows several instances of suicide. It is not a realistic portrayal of suicide. This is a fun movie about heaven and hell, angels and demons, good and evil. But it's still a part of the movie. If you don't want to even hear about the topic discussed, please feel free to close out of this video. Ash and I fully understand this is not something that I want to trigger anyone about. The 2005 film Constantine was directed by Francis Lawrence and was written by screenwriter Frank Capello and Irish screenwriter Kevin Broadbent. And I'd like to say, leave it to an Irishman to really make the most Catholic, big-budget comic book film adaptation ever to grace our screens. There's angels and demons. There's this idea that God and the devil are using humans as pawns in this cosmic game of good versus evil. There's deep Catholic lore about the spear of destiny, or the spear that the Roman soldier pierced the side of Jesus, which caused him to die while he was on the crucifix. And there's fun elements of holy water, last rites, and everybody's favorite part of any exorcism movie ever, Latin. And the film was a relative success. It was the 29th highest box office movie of 2005. Not too shabby on account of the MPAA forcing an R rating onto this relatively tame film. It made $230.9 million at the box office, which would translate to today's money as $230.9 million plus inflation. The film stars Keanu Reeves as John Constantine, a private exorcist that is trying to buy his way into heaven by saving as many souls as he can. He is damned because of a suicide attempt he made as a child, actually left him dead for several minutes. And he has a short time left on this earth because of a smoking habit that would lead Humphrey Bogart to have a bit of a cough. Rachel Weisz plays LAPD detective Angela Dodson, who is brought into this world of the occult due to the apparent suicide of her sister, a woman in a mental institution who has psychic abilities. Actual cannibal Shia LaBeouf plays Chaz Kramer, Constantine's driver and apprentice. The always welcome Tilda Swinton plays the Archangel Gabriel. And come on, her presence is angelic. Jaimon Hanso plays Papa Midnight, this being notable as being his first, but most certainly not his last, role in a comic book film. Gavin Rossdale of the post-grunge alt-rock band Bush plays the demon Balthazar, and he's just loving every minute of this. Ignoring that, and Peter Stormare plays the devil himself, good old Lucifer. And for a brief less than 10 minutes of this movie,
most unclean.
I do miss the old name.
He is the star of the film. So the initial casting of Keanu Reeves as John Constantine is a bit of an outlier. John Constantine is a character that was famously created by Alan Moore in his Hellblazer comic series. And yes, 2005, Keanu Reeves is coming off The Matrix Reloaded, and The Matrix Revolutions. He is possibly one of the biggest stars in Hollywood at the time. At the time of casting, most certainly, because that would have been probably back in 2003. But Alan Moore created John Constantine to look like Sting, the musician, from The Police. You know, Every Breath You Take, Roxanne, Da-do-do-do, da-da-da-da. He looks like this. And Keanu, while I would approve seeing Keanu in a nice metal loincloth, does not. And Constantine is, much like Sting, British, which is an accent all Keanu fans know from films like Much Ado About Nothing or Bram Stoker's Dracula.
If I may inquire, what in fact happened to Mr. Renfield in Transylvania? It is the man himself. Look, he's grown young. I know where the bastard sleeps. I brought him there.
He just can't do. So with everyone wanting these comic-accurate portrayals of these characters, why would I be pushing to see Keanu Reeves play Constantine again? Because I love Keanu, and who really cares? In Tim Burton's Batman films, he has Michael Keaton sleeping upside down like a fucking bat. In Sam Raimi's Spider-Man movies, Peter Parker shoots web fluid out of his body, which is just gross, and that is not comic accurate. Hell, in everyone's favorite Disney-owned intellectual property franchise, Thor is portrayed as this himbo surfer dude type character, which is absolutely not how he is portrayed in the comics. And everyone loves him. To be fair, comic accuracy does matter, but to a point. It is more important for an individual film to tell an interesting story with a compelling character. And we all know that Keanu can crush it as Constantine, as we've seen it in 2005 already. So let's give it to him again. The film Constantine is sort of an anomaly when it comes to comic book films, and even more so when we look at it through a contemporary lens. Constantine is a dark film. Yes, it does have a cheeky sense of humor, but for the most part, it is a very serious movie about very serious things with very weird things happening. It's not just dark, it's damn near bleak. Our protagonist is actively dying of lung cancer while he spends his days ripping demons out of possessed people's bodies. And the film's tone is much more akin to the horror film of the mid-2000s. Your The Rings, your Exorcism of Emily's Rose, your The Grudges, than it is comparable to the action comic book blockbuster movies like, say, Daredevil or Spider-Man or Catwoman. There's creature makeup that is pretty solidly blended with CGI as of 2005. It looks pretty decent. There's full CG creatures that are not great, but they get a pass. There's a dude called Beeman who likes bugs. It's noted in the movie that he likes bugs, and he dies having insects crawl out of every orifice in his body. There's jump scare scenes and there's rain. Like, so much rain. Like, I would kill to have this much rainfall. Rain doesn't just happen in Los Angeles like this. So the MCU and more recent DCEU fare, such as Aquaman, Birds of Prey, or the Suicide Squad movie, they're all known to have humor. Almost forced in. Wherever they can find a joke, they put a joke into their movies. Constantine does the same thing, but with scares. The filmmakers not only incorporate horror elements into the movie, they push the genre so that they give the audience a variety of scares. Stephen King, the true sovereign of the spooky, he has a quote that talks about the nature of horror. He says there are 3 levels of horror elements. There is the gross out, the horror, and the terror. And each element brings the audience a deeper level of dread. The example of gross out would be torture porn, the Saw sequels, the Hostel franchise. It's splattery, it's grody, it's visceral. The horror is unnatural. Creatures, unstoppable killers, monsters from different dimensions. And finally, terror. The worst one, as King says. It's the one where you come home and notice that everything you own has been taken away and replaced by an exact substitute. It's when the lights go out and you feel something behind you. You hear it. You feel its breath against your ear. But when you turn around, nothing's there. And Constantine implements all 3 of them into this movie. There's the gross out, having a bug crawl out of somebody's eye, the horror of having the demonic creatures, and the terror when you think you've exorcised a demon only to find that brief moment on their face when they realize it's trying to crawl its way out of your stomach. The effective use of horror in Constantine elevates the film to a point that has been rarely touched by these carefully cultivated cinematic universes. When Constantine's allies inevitably die after getting him information that is necessary to move the plot forward, because this is a detective noir horror film, and that's just what happens when you're in that genre as a side character, they don't just die. They perish in horrific and incredibly specific ways regarding the characters in question. Father Hennessy, played by Pruitt Taylor Vince. He is an alcoholic priest who can commune with the dead. He uses alcohol as a way to silence the voices he constantly hears. After he helps Constantine by talking to Angela's sister, who's dead in the morgue, he wants to quiet the voices, so he goes to a liquor store. He cracks open a bottle of wine and puts it to his mouth, and nothing flows. He puts down the bottle of wine and it spills everywhere. He does this again and again. This shit right here. And it keeps happening to every bottle of booze he opens, even the ones where he smashes it open and tries to dump it into his mouth like he's a fucking frat boy or something. This form of psychological torture is so deep-rooted into our storytelling DNA as a species that I can link this torment that Father Hennessy is going through to the punishment of Tantalus in Greek mythology. You know, the guy whose punishment is he's stuck and he's starving and the food and drink are just out of reach, and every time he gets close, it moves further away from him. When he falls to the ground dead, we are told by the police that he died of acute alcohol poisoning. So he's taking in the poison of the alcohol without actually getting the alcohol into it. I've already talked about Beeman and his fancy little bit of foreshadowing that is represented in an early scene between the 2 of them.
What is it exactly with you and bugs? I just like them.
In Shia. Poor Shia. Chaz Kramer. At his character's highest moment in the film. After spending the entire movie begging John to be more than just a driver.
You ever think if you told me more now, maybe I could help out? Then why don't I apprentice something besides driving then, John? I'm begging you, John, please, please.
To be part of the action. He finally gets his chance to help John with an exorcism. And it's not just any exorcism. It is the exorcism. It is the one that will banish the son of the devil to hell to avert Armageddon. And it's an exorcism that John wouldn't have been able to do without Chaz Kramer's help. So he's validated by the story. This is important. He finally made his mark, and it is the most important mark that he could have ever made. They banished the demon from Rachel Weisz, and as he's about to say his cool one-liner, the one that he practices in his cab every so often,
This is Kramer. Chaz Kramer.
bam. Hubris. So okay, I think I've successfully made the argument that Constantine is a banger and you should all watch it on HBO Max tonight. Yeah, but Enemy at the Gates, though, like, what is the point of that movie? Is it pro-communist or anti-communist? Like, I can't tell. I mean, it's anti-Nazi, that's for sure, and I think it is actually it's a cool way of doing it so that instead of having them speak in Russian and German, the way you can tell they're speaking a different language is the British accents, they're Russians, and the American accents are Germans. Although why does Ron Perlman, who is a Russian, speak in an American accent other than the fact that he is Ron Perlman? I don't know what this is. Why is Enemy at the Gates so just... Okay, but now let's get into why Keanu Reeves as Constantine needs a revival. In the film, Keanu is bringing less of his action hero persona from his earlier films, Johnny Utah in Point Break, Jack Traven in Speed, or Neo in The Matrix, and bringing more of a Bruce Willis in a good Die Hard movie type energy. The reason why good Bruce Willis action films, specifically good Die Hard films, work is because the character is usually having a pretty shitty day. He's tired, he's sore, and he has to fight this vague Eastern European giant of a man. And in Constantine, Keanu is actively dying of lung cancer while still chain-smoking cigarettes. He's got this attitude of a dude who's been on a bender and just got off it, so his hangover is literally killing him. And he's fighting demons. This level of frustration worked through Keanu back in 2005, when he was at the peak of his stardom, peak of his physical abilities. And now at the age of 57, he has only honed further his abilities of being a persistent and run-down action hero. Shown most recently in the third John Wick movie when he is stabbed in his neck, actively bleeding, gets a little bit of a suture on it, and he still gets to fight dudes while on horseback. An older Keanu playing an older Constantine would only enhance the character. I wouldn't call the film an action movie, but every once in a while, the character has to roll up his sleeves and get down and dirty with some forces of evil. And in every interaction when Constantine is facing demons, he has to come up with different ways to combat them, implementing a bunch of fun gadgets that are sometimes planted, sometimes come out of nowhere, but totally work with this private detective archetype of this exorcist he is playing. This rag that burns a whole bunch of demons, I'm not sure what it is, but apparently it's this really holy relic. It's kind of a one and done, and I like it. There's a box of screeching beetles. He uses a big mirror, a blessed cross that is able to turn an entire building's sprinkler system into holy water, and this big-ass cross shotgun combo. And in the first scene that he is in, we get this PI-like exorcist fully on display. He walks into a room and there is a possessed girl tied to a bed. He obviously needs to figure out what type of demon is possessing this girl. So instead of asking questions, doing typical, reading specific passages or whatever, he puts his cigarette down and takes out amulets that are tied to like a key ring, and he just holds it up to the sun and sees which one affects the demon. It brings this outrageous, highly stressful, and potentially mind-blowing situation that would probably break most people in the world and turns it into something pedestrian. This is the worst day of this family's life. To John, it is Tuesday. He also travels to hell multiple times in the film.
God, I hate this part.
Once by putting his feet in water and looking into the eyes of a cat. And once by getting shocked in an electric chair by Papa Midnight, where he gains the last clues and is finally able to put the pieces together. And since this is essentially a detective film, he sometimes has to corner a demon and get some answers. So, in possibly the most creative turn this film makes, he threatens to absolve a demon of all of his sins so that once he dies, instead of going to hell, he will go to heaven by performing the last rites if he does not get the information he needs.
In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
That shit is great. And of course, nobody can talk about mystical mumbo-jumbo as believably as Keanu Reeves can.
Corinthians goes to 21x in the Bible in hell.
They have Bibles in hell.
The best thing about this movie is the climax of the film. For all intents and purposes, he fails. He is unable to save Angela due to a duplicitous move by the Archangel Gabriel teaming up with the son of the devil to bring about Armageddon. Tilda. So in order for him to avert the apocalypse, he has to do something that is contrary to what he has been trying to do the entire film. Earlier in the film, we are told that Constantine is the only soul the devil himself would come up to collect personally due to all the demons that he's banished over the years. So, in this situation, when he is beaten, he has no other recourse. He has to give up the remaining months or possibly weeks of life that he has been clinging to throughout the entire film. And he has to throw away his chance at absolution by killing himself. And in doing so, the devil appears. In possibly the greatest way that the devil has ever been portrayed, in a white suit covered in tar. It's just, you don't have to be Elizabeth Hurley to be the devil, okay? But that's what you want in your hero of your film about heaven, hell, good, evil. Somebody who is willing to put their life on the line. Somebody who has been, up until this point, selfish, self-centered. He kills himself to save the world. And because he made this sacrifice, as well as you do a favor for the devil does a favor for you, his favor was to give Angela's sister a seat in heaven because she doesn't deserve to be in hell. Because of this, he has been forgiven and is going to be taken up to heaven. The devil fixes his lungs and then gives him his life back and basically says he wants to prove to Keanu that he deserves his place in hell. That sacrifice mentality, that's a character growth. That's it. Balls in your court, brothers of Warner. I didn't even talk about how Constantine and Angela, while they're the male lead and the female lead of the film, they're not romantic. That needs to be done in more movies. Having a male lead and a female lead not have to give us a Keanu Reeves Constantine Lega sequel. Please. You know what? No please. Now, Keanu has gone on record as recently as last year saying that he would love to reprise his role in a Constantine sequel. I want it, Keanu wants it, we all want it. So do it.
Lou, what took you so long?
I would prefer a legacy sequel where we get to see Keanu Reeves as Constantine just 20 years later, but I wouldn't hate the idea of possibly him being some sort of side character in another character's story. We can have Tilda Swinton come back. That's not a bad idea. Nobody's ever said no Tilda. And yes, I know that he died, but you can also bring back Shia LaBeouf. You can definitely bring back somebody from the dead. I don't care. Comics bring people back from the dead all the time. We will accept anything you have to offer. We accepted that Andrew Garfield was a good Spider-Man, for Christ's sakes, and his movies were trash. So yeah, thanks for watching. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Comment on other Keanu Lega sequels you'd like to see. Do you want to have another Lake House? I would like to see another Lake House. Sandy Bullock and Keanu Reeves coming back and teaming up in some sort of weird timey-wimey bullshit rom-com. I'm okay with it. Let's do this. Check you later.